supported by the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Ukraine. And today we are to start our press briefing with an extremely important one. We have Pavlo Kyrylenko with us, head of Donetsk Oblast Military and Civil Administration. And of course, the first question we have for you, Pavlo, is this. We all saw that about 10:30 a.m. the Russian military hit Kramatorsk, its railway station. Could you please tell us what's happening there? What is the situation? What about the victims? You're welcome, Pavlo. Can you hear us? Today? Yeah, I can hear you, yeah. So, today, after cluster rocket hit at that time, about 10:30 a.m., when people were boarding the trains at the central railway station Kramatorsk, and those were just innocent civilians, and there was a cruise missile from .U with cluster type ammo, and there have been 39 people who died, and 83 people have been wounded by now. All who needed help have been transported to healthcare facilities in the oblast, and we also engage our colleagues from neighboring oblasts to do surgeries and to provide the necessary help. The enemy did not even try to disprove this information. Well, they immediately tried to disseminate some fakes, saying that this rocket strike was by the Ukrainian military. That's what they had. But again, this is yet another evidence of an extreme cynicism on their side. They're very cynical. At the same time, I would say that all the evidence will be provided. And in some pro-Russian Telegram channels, there were some messages that indeed this rocket strike was by the Russian Federation against a Russian military. That's what they publish in those Telegram channels. So now we are responding to all these things. Most important is to provide everybody with required medical help to save lives of those people. Of course, it is very sad, and you see what the occupiers are doing. That's what I have always been emphasizing, that they will try to create panic, and they will hit the local population, local civilians. They monitor the railway stations. They know where to hit, where to strike. Initially, they used, they would only hit railways as such. That was their tactics. But now they hit not only rail as such, but now they use cluster armor, which is against people, not against buildings. So that's been targeted at local civilians. Pavlo, could you please tell us what about those people? Do you have sufficient numbers of healthcare professionals in Kramatorsk to provide medical care? Is that process has it been well established? Yes, this is a well-established process. It's not only about Kramatorsk. I will not mention all locations where people have been transported, and ambulances bring people, ambulance cars bring people to all those hospitals, and some of those people will be transferred to other oblasts depending on their health condition. Today, we also have our Lviv studio with us. I think they will connect now, and journalists there will also be able to ask their questions. Dear friends in Lviv, please join us if you can. And I would like to ask you, we understand that during these days there has been active evacuation of people from Kramatorsk. What about this process now? Will it continue? What are your suggestions for local civilian population? Look, I got data about numbers of people evacuated every day. And we started evacuation, and we insistently advised people to evacuate since the 26th of February. But there is a human factor, people think that they are in a relatively safe, relatively quiet Kramatorsk, and they will not be affected that much and all that. So after such active appeals from us, there has been about 1 week that the numbers of evacuees have increased. They increased twice compared with previous period. But, with all due respect for media, for mass media, now we will be acting in a coordinated way. We have to care about people's life and health. We have been working on that process to make it as safe as possible. Of course, the enemy has their surveillance tools, monitoring tools. They clearly understood that this is a railway station, that this is a city, that there is a lot of people concentrated there. And they only do it to prevent people from leaving our oblast. That's what I kept emphasizing. So, implementation of all those measures will change, and what will be the new format? We will inform local administrations properly. Mr. Kyrylenko, I cannot but ask you about other locations in Donetsk Oblast. We have seen, today also Avdiivka was shelled, as well as other towns and villages. What's happening there? What's the situation there at the moment? Evacuation is going on from those locations we mentioned: Avdiivka, Loboda, Marinka, Kurakhova, all those locations along the front line. And there is shelling almost around the clock, especially in Avdiivka and Vuhledar. There is permanent shelling, and the enemy has been preparing for mass-scale escalation, mass-scale offensive action. Could you please tell us, we understand that there are always people who don't leave their homes till the very last moment. You mentioned it already. Is it possible now in those locations which are being shelled all the time to bring humanitarian aid there? Do those aid locations work, or it's impossible at the moment? Well, humanitarian aid, starting with foodstuffs to medicines to hygienic items, it's being delivered. Unfortunately, the enemy can see and understand, even without any confidential information that I provide. The enemy can understand where it happens. For example, 2 days ago in Vuhledar, there was humanitarian aid being distributed, food was being distributed to local innocent civilians. And there, too, there was a mortar shelling. So, to answer your question, yes, all that humanitarian aid is being distributed, is being delivered, but I will say it in very strict words. It would be better for us in this case to have that humanitarian aid, but we would have fewer people here. We would prefer to see people in relatively safe regions of Ukraine, not here, before the situation stabilizes. Pavlo, yesterday your colleague from Luhansk military and civil administration said that in Luhansk Oblast at the moment there has been no one hospital anymore which would not have been hit by now, which would not have been shelled. As far as I understand, now there is this continuation. In Kramatorsk they hit railway station. They target purposely such infrastructural objects like schools and hospitals. The same happens in your oblast. Do you understand it correct? Well, there is a systemic they shell on everything, all civilian infrastructure, all critical infrastructure, critical medical infrastructure. During this wartime. And again, I would repeat, whatever you may think about my appeals, my calls to leave, the enemy will not stop with anything. They have failed to immediately take those cities, so the enemy will be just they understand that they will be destroyed by Ukrainian armed forces, so they switch to cruise missiles, aviation, and they use those tools against local innocent civilians. What's the situation with water supply, electricity supply in your oblast? Situation is under control. We see that, of course, there are some interruptions with water supply and electricity supply, especially along the front line, but we work as fast as possible. Local military civilian administration, the repair teams, utilities, make every effort to restore them as soon as possible. I manage all these things in online mode. I have my deputies on site. We work and we allocate our efforts to control every part of our oblast, every location. I can't but ask about Mariupol, what's going on there in Mariupol at the moment, whether at least some humanitarian corridors started operating there, and whether there is any, whether it's at all possible to bring any humanitarian items there. There is no way to bring, even after all those coordination efforts, nothing has been implemented. We can state that for more than 1 month there has been so-called green corridor, but it works in one direction. People can leave using their own vehicles. They are taken and brought there, and this route still works, still operates, even though the enemy keeps violating those agreements. But humanitarian cargoes have never been delivered. Those agreements that we have had about the ship to be able to get Turkish Republic of Turkey involved, there is no result about that. Pavlo, recently we see some information whereby it has been very difficult to live even in own cars for people, for local people. Enemies do not let people go to Zaporizhia, to Ukraine controlled territory, or they only let people to temporarily occupied territories. Do you have any information about that? Is it true? Are those facts confirmed? Indeed, day to day it becomes they make it more difficult. Like only women with children can live, males are not allowed to live. They have to either stay in the city of Mariupol, or they are offered, or not offered, but just forced to live to those uncontrollable territories or to the territory of Russian Federation. And then there are some cases, and we document all those cases, and law enforcement documents all those cases where people train comes, and then they are immediately mobilized to so-called Donetsk People's Republic. You can imagine people from Ukraine-controlled territories are forced to go and fight against Ukrainian armed forces. We have seen such cases. So people are deported, and then it's very difficult to track those people. Why are they doing it? Because the invaders, the occupiers, have run into a problem, namely they see a significant difference between what happened in 2014 and when there was that situation. People did not completely understand who is who back then. What is that Donetsk, so-called Donetsk People's Republic about? Now people just don't want to move to that Donetsk, so-called Donetsk People's Republic. They are irritated, and they the enemies just the people are forced by the enemy to make fake statements. Journalists, dear journalists, you are welcome to ask your questions. If you have any questions, you are welcome. Please speak into the microphone. Well, maybe you have provided a really complete information, so I don't see any questions there. If you have anything to add, if you want to say something for those people who remain in Kramatorsk, in Slaviansk, in other locations, maybe you may want to tell them something. What should they better do? What should be the algorithm of their conduct? Well, the enemy monitors all our channels, all our publications, and I would like to tell you that I continue working and handling the situation because we have a lot of work now about wounded people and about continuing taking all those necessary actions so that those who already suffered should receive all the assistance that they require. And those who have been have to be evacuated, we continue that work, but we take all security precautions. Believe me, we take all those precautions. The enemy is very cynical. You know, the enemy sees local civilians and hits it, and it's very difficult to overcome that cynism. But we do everything possible to bring people into safe places as soon as possible. Glory to Ukraine, glory to heroes. Thank you, Mr. Kyrylenko, for finding time to join us. Thank you very much, and thank you for your work. Dear friends, we are to stay here. You are welcome to monitor our broadcast. I'd like to remind you that at 3 p.m. we'll have Yuri Halushkin with us, commander of the Territorial Defense Forces in the Armed Forces of Ukraine. He'll be here in our studio. We'll be able to ask him any questions. And at 3:30 we'll have Alexander Motuzyanek, spokesman of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, who will tell us about the current operational situation on the front line. So